Thanks, David. So what we're going to be doing is I have a short presentation. Actually, we both have short presentations because there's only about 25 minutes. But I'm going to be talking a little bit about the state of analytics now and some of the really cool things you can be doing with analytics at a high level that you might not have thought of yet or you might not have evolved to yet. The interesting part of the presentation today is actually Mark's talk right after mine, where he's going to drill down on how they've actually used it to improve, well, revenue for game companies, which is why we're all here. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing of that, and we've worked together, and there's a lot of substance there. So again, well, let me kick off with the opportunity. So I'm going to start just a couple seconds about myself so you can put everything into context. As I said, then I'm going to talk about the current state of analytics, then what I call Analytics 2.0, which is what you can be doing with them, but you're probably not, and then a quick summary. So for those who don't know me, I've actually been in the game space about 20 years. Started a company called Merscom, which was a core game company. We pivoted into casual, then pivoted into social when we were acquired by Playdom back in 2010, then became part of Disney, and now I am CEO of a company called 519 Games, which is a social gaming joint venture of Capital Broadcasting and EW Scripps, two of the larger entertainment companies in the US. And at 519, we're both developing our own games and using various analytics packages, but we've actually just launched a publishing program where we're bringing third-party games to market. So this is just a very high-level view of where you can start at the beginning with analytic tools and where they can evolve to and what you can use them for. And if you look, pretty much that bottom set of tools is what you're currently seeing in the industry. And the top set is what Mark's going to be talking about, and those are, I think, the really interesting things you can do to move your company to the next level and become much more profitable and successful. So right now, what analytics do are, they're very, so we're talking about predictive analytics later, so I would call these reactive analytics, where they're telling you what's going on in your game, allowing you to see what's happening now, what happened previously, and then what happens in the future is the predictive analytics we're going to be talking about. So right now, analytics are all centered around customer lifetime value, and you're determining that based on retention, monetization, engagement, and virality, and drilling down on that. And you're looking at this customer lifetime value to create better business decisions. By incorporating future predictive lifetime value of players and being able to focus on the players that are going to be generating the most money or make changes to increase the lifetime value of a player, you're generating more revenue for your company. So the current state, as I said, it's really revolved around metrics that look at your game at an instance in time or over a past experience. And I'm going to be blowing through these relatively quickly, so I'll leave my email address up there and I'd be glad to send it to anyone. Just email me and I'll send you the presentation. But what the analytic tools do now, for those who haven't seen them or not that familiar, they provide these dashboards generally that allow you to quickly see how your game is doing and how it's changed from maybe yesterday, a week ago, a month ago. And most social game companies and mobile game companies will be looking at, first thing they do when they get in the morning is you look at your dashboard, and it really drives what you do moving forward. But that's, again, hopefully most of you here are already familiar with that. What's really exciting is what can be done with analytics. So first, there's a bunch of different analytic analysis that aren't necessarily being done in companies, but answer questions that are very, very important to a social game company. And again, I don't have to read through here, and I'd be glad to send this. But one of the most interesting is the regression analysis. So you figure out what factors, what users can significantly impact your revenue and how much it can do that. Time series analysis, again, I don't think that's really getting enough attention, but that's really important for not only understanding your game, but understanding your business. It allows you to understand how much revenue you should bring in next quarter, how profitable your game is, how many users you will have returning in the future. Again, other predictive modeling tools, and Mark will be touching on these, but they really get into the user rather than just the game's performance. Who's more likely to monetize? When are they going to monetize? How are they going to react to in-game messaging? Again, we're going to hear a case study in a few minutes, but this is what is the future of analytics in general in terms of driving better performance for your games. Data mining, which it's interesting, you see a lot of it outside the game industry. It is being done here too, but things like understanding which items bundle together. So if you go to Amazon, they're great at suggesting items to purchase when you're already making a purchase decision. You rarely see that in a social game. By incorporating this type of analysis into your development structure, you're able to really drive more monetization, more customer satisfaction. And then, Monte Carlo simulation, how long on average will players stay in the game? When will they come back? If you change some of the mechanics, how will that affect the game in general? Again, there's tools that do this, including Mark's company has a great one. But these are the type of questions that you can be answering that you might not be using analytics for right now. Same with optimization, linear programming, and that's something that not necessarily goes into the development of the game, but actually your resource allocation. Do you want to put 3 programmers and an artist on the game, or 3 artists and a programmer? And you can use that to calculate, you can use analysis there to calculate which one's going to generate more revenue, more profitability for your company. So what I wanted to kind of touch on here, and this is really, given the time limits, it's incredibly superficial, but it's that most of us are only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of using analytics to optimize the performance of our game, to optimize the user experience. There are so many tools out there that you should focus on, and that's going to allow you to really create competitive advantage and become a much more profitable company. And if you don't believe me, Mark's going to give a great example of that now. So thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd. So I hope I can rise to the challenge here of the analytics whiz kid, or not kid. Predictive modeling, as Lloyd says, this really does build on where I think the games industry is in terms of the state of the art. Sorry. So what I thought about was actually let's just touch on some definitions first. It's really actually quite hard to get into the mindset of players. It's easy as a developer to develop the game from your own mindset, forgetting that all players are not like you. Some are competent, some are struggling, some are frustrated. Some are enjoying certain features. Developers are expert players at the end of the day. And the secret in using analytics is to allow data to drive understanding and to really get inside the players' mindsets, to really understand what types of players you've got in your game and how you can engage with them and how you can monetize them. So really, dashboards are great and they tell you a lot about the performance of your game, but they don't tell you the whole story. And our sort of thesis and our orientation in games analytics is to really bring through player behavior analysis, to really understand the different players, why they're playing your game, what they're not enjoying, why they're monetizing, and really being able to react to that, to build better games and to build games that are more personal and a better playing experience all around. So we're up for letting data drive decision making. That is not to replace great ideas for games, good design concepts, well-executed games. It's an enabler. It helps games companies make better decisions about their games and to make their investment, return on investment, much better. So just as a bit of positioning before we get into the predictive analytics bit, dashboards are an incredibly vital part of the toolkit, as Lloyd says, coming in every morning and seeing how the game performed yesterday. But they only tell you about the average player. They tell you stuff that's happened in the past. They're good in terms of finding out the problems or the reassuring things about your game. But if you've got a poor retention rate, the dashboards aren't really going to tell you how to solve that problem. the solution to those problems is in the deeper analytics, the predictive modeling, and really getting inside the data and inside the player behaviors. So it's quite a complex area. The games industry is incredibly rich in terms of data. We know and we can collect all of the behaviors inside the game. Now, I come from a background of doing customer analytics for banks and retailers and telcos. And really, nobody thinks that they're on the end of a particularly intelligent relationship with their bank. And that's because the banks really don't know very much about you guys. In the games industry, we know a lot about what happens in the virtual world, so we can actually be pretty precise in terms of the engagement that we want to make with different players. So moving forward from dashboards and using dashboards to complement predictive analytics, I think, is where the games industry needs to get to really understand the players. So what does that mean? Beyond dashboards, then, we can start to think about segmentation as a statistical tool. This is a segmentation of a casual Facebook-type game, grinding, building game. And you can see that we've defined 7 different segments. They've got different playing styles. They've got different ways of engaging with the game. Because of time, we'll just sort of skip through this very quickly. But you can see that we've got an axis which is revenue potential, cross-reference with virality. And so in the top right, we've got the green circle, which is our early enthusiasts, and those are your potential VIPs. Those are the guys that are going to really engage with the game, and they're going to be the ones that generate most of the revenue from the game. So actually having a relationship with those guys, an understanding of those guys, then to build a personalized experience for them is incredibly important. And you would talk to them in a different way, potentially, to the guys in the top left, the purple circle. They're low in revenue potential, but they're high in virality, so they're inviting all their friends into the game. They're not spending money themselves, but they're incredibly influential of a core set of players. So you don't want to upset them. You probably want to encourage them by giving them new content or special rewards or something that keeps them active in the game, because the impact of them leaving is going to be quite dramatic in terms of the active playing base because of the number of people that they influence. When we start to look into the bigger segments, 31% are in our blue segment in the middle there, losing momentum. That's the one that we worry about for retention. And there are different reasons why people leave the game. So this gives you an overview of the different characteristics of the players. But this is only the starting point, and we need to delve down deeper into those segments to really understand what's making the players tick, what are the triggers for people leaving the game, and more importantly, what we can do about it. At GamesAnalytics, we've developed a system that builds targets of players based on their likelihood to leave the game, their likelihood to monetize, and then we send targeted in-game messaging to those players to improve revenues and to improve engagement. So the ultimate output of this stuff is a marketing layer within the game that sends targeted messages based on players' behaviors. And so instead of having spamming or triggers within the game, we're actually getting to quite a sophisticated way of interacting with the players to make a personalized experience within the game. So before we go on to the sort of the predictive modeling, I'll skip through this, but what we tend to do when we're working with clients is to start at beta phase, and we really focus in on retention and engagement, maximize that before we move on to virality, monetization, and then actually, it's a slightly perverse, but we look at acquisition last, so that we know which acquisition channels have driven the high lifetime value players, the highly engaged players, and then we can retrospectively understand where our acquisition budgets should be spent on the next iteration. But certainly retention is a complex area, but it's very valuable, and actually the impact of running predictive analytics is dramatic. And if you get that right during beta with the general game design in terms of the difficulty curves and the compulsion and the engagement, then you can actually do a lot to build a community to monetize that in due course when the game is launched. So we look at different types of retention. We look at early game retention, mid-game retention, and late game retention, because there's different reasons why people leave the game at those different stages. We look at general game design concepts at that stage. What's the tutorial like? What's the onboarding experience like? What's the difficulty curve like? Are people getting stuck? And the data can drive all of that insight to feedback clearly to the designers how the game can be optimized prior to launch. We can work this stuff off a couple of thousand players as well, so we don't need hordes of players to make the analytics work. And the sort of the background to this and the background to applying the analytics to good game design is actually to start to think about the free-to-play concepts and free-to-play thinking. So being generous in the initial levels, getting as many people into the game as possible and engaged with the game so that then you can monetize them in due course. It's generally a bad thing to try and monetize too early. It tends to create a defection problem in its own right. So encouraging positive behavior during the early levels, giving away free stuff, tempting people into the store to have a look around. Give them chances to stay in the game. The stats are very hard. 70% of players could leave the game and not come back after day one. Those sorts of things are heartbreaking if you spent your hard-earned acquisition budgets. But then once you've built that engaged community, then you can really monetize as people have ground through the levels. We tend to see very strong evidence that if people have ground through the first few levels and then start to purchase to accelerate their gameplay, then they've got much higher chance of turning into VIPs and become a real asset in terms of the game revenues. So onto the retention case study then. Different reasons why people leave. At the start, maybe it's just not for them and there's not a lot that we can do about it. In the middle, for some reason they become disengaged. Maybe the game's not balanced properly for them. It's too easy, too hard. But keeping those players that have actually committed to the game and engaged with the game, keeping them involved is absolutely vital. And then at the end, maybe people are running out of content. So let's break the problem down and let's solve each of the different ways that people exit the game. And very often, a good thing to do is look at momentum and the change in momentum as players move through the levels or move through the sessions. You can see that people decelerate, so their session times become shorter. They may take longer to level up. There's very clear indications of people disengaging from games, and actually you can build that into your thinking process and actually into alert processes to start sending targeted messages. The trick here is to do stuff before the player leaves the game and you've lost them, because it's very hard to get people back via email. It's much better to be proactive and start to build a relationship with players before they leave, but doing that on the basis that you know that they're at risk of leaving. So looking at momentum is very important. Also looking at success levels, how well players are passing missions. Are they continuing to fail missions? Do they fail multiple times? There's alerts that can be set into the game as well for different types of segments in terms of their competency. How long are they going to stick at it? When are they going to give up? And getting the difficulty balancing right is really important as well to keep as many people in the game as possible. These are the sorts of variables that we tend to use to build into the predictive models. So these are all at player level, and the further to the right the bar goes, the more predictive it is in terms of retention. So what we can see, for example, mean lag is the average time between an action. So we collect detailed events from the game, and mean lag is the average number of seconds between each of those actions for an individual player. And you can see that a high mean lag, so a very slow, methodical progress through the game, is actually going to result in a retention problem. And a very quick, impatient journey through the game is going to result in a retention problem as well. In the middle, you can see 8-9 seconds on average for this particular game. We actually have got very competent, clear thinking, precise players that are engaged with the game. They know what they're doing. They like all of the features. They get it. So looking at those extremes and understanding where there's frustration, looking at impatience, looking at people that are disengaged because it's too easy, all of those factors can build into quite a powerful picture of retention problems to come. So all of these variables tend to be predictive in terms of the mean lag, how successful players are at completing missions. If it's too easy and they complete them all the time, that's not good. If it's too hard and they're failing all the time, that's not good. So in the middle is good again. And level momentum, how quick do players just want to complete the game and move through, or do they actually roam around the level and experience the whole of the level before moving on, is another important predictor. So this is kind of the setup for the modeling. We always analyze the target group, the group that we're interested, against the contrasting group. So in this case, it's defectors against engaged. And we have various different definitions for defectors and engaged, but it's very important that we have that contrast for the models to work. We always compare the same analysis period for both groups, because we want to compare like with like. And actually what we're trying to do is to understand the key differences in the playing behaviors during that same time frame. So let's say that's the first 20 minutes of gameplay. We are looking at how engaged players play the game in the first 20 minutes versus defectors. And we can draw out, what are the different variables that are predictive of people defecting. And as I said before, we're incredibly well off in terms of the richness of the data. We can sometimes get country, age, and gender. We very often do level momentum, average seconds per event, the socialness of players. More sociable players are less likely to leave. The features that are consumed, how players use the resources in the game. Do they use all of the resources, or do they concentrate on one or two? And then down into the detailed events, what are the different balances in terms of the goal counts? What are the different assets that are used, how their inventory looks. There's lots of rich data that we can bring to bear in terms of building these models. And once the model's built on these factors, then we can apply it in the game. And using the technology that GamesAnalytics has built, we can send targeted messages into those players that are at risk of leaving before they ultimately leave the game, giving them incentives, rewards, extra stuff to encourage them to continue to engage with the game. And we've had dramatic successes at moving the retention curves in the dashboards, nearly doubling the retention rate by deploying this sort of toolkit within games. So that's a quick journey through predictive modeling, ultimately ending up in in-game messaging or improving the general game design. But actually, dashboards through to predictive analytics, through to game design, and the implications of that in terms of targeted messaging, I think is where ultimately the whole of the games industry will move to really take advantage of the incredible richness of data that can generate these sorts of player insights to make you really reactive to the players that are in your games. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you're all eager to start your evening, but does anybody have any questions for either of these two speakers? We have somebody that's got some serious questions. I can tell by the way you raised your hand.
Hey there. So in your slide presentation, you point out that the incompetent players, you still get money from them. How does that work? Like,
no, I don't think. Sorry, I don't think I said that. Competent players, you can get money from. Incompetent players, less so. Incompetent players will just tend to leave the game pretty quickly, and there's not a lot you can do about them.
oh, okay. So you had a number there underneath them in terms of what they were spending, but you're saying it's a relatively insignificant amount.
Analytics is all about focus. There's lots of analysis that you can do, and one of the things that is helpful when you do a segmentation is allowing you to concentrate on the right problems. So the incompetent guys, leave alone, and try not to recruit them in the first place, I would suggest, if you can. Let's go after the guys that have got revenue potential that can be saved in terms of engagement. There's lots of stuff that we can do, but we've got finite time, so let's concentrate on the big problems and the big wins.
On the slide before, you said you have a 95% success rate of recapturing a player within the 20 minutes by putting an activity in front of them. What exactly were we putting in front of them, or was that a typo?
No, so the 95% was actually we pretty much doubled the retention rate. We took the retention rate, the day one retention rate from 30% to 60%. So that's what the 95 refers to, a doubling of the retention rate. Not in terms of the percentage of people that we saved. What we were putting in front of them was actually on this case, it was a leveled sort of message where we were initially giving them a tutorial and a hint when they were failing a mission continually, and then we let them have a level for certain people. We let them have a level pass, a skip, to get through that mission to carry on in the game, because we felt it was so important to keep them active in the game that we wanted them to encourage them to carry on.
And percentage-wise, just I'm interested in your expertise. For a 1, 7, and 30-day retention, what would you say are outstanding goals or goals that a developer should be shooting for on a social game?
Well, it really depends on the game and the platform, doesn't it? So
social, so not mobile, and this is on Facebook.
It's kind of how long is a piece of string. The sort of stats that we've seen is a sort of 60% return rate from day one, but using analytics actually to move those numbers is the important thing. If you're sitting at 15%, moving it to 30%. If you're sitting at 30%, moving it to 60%. That's the important thing here. It's actually to deal with the problem that you've got.
Also gets back to looking into segmenting, though. You need to make sure that you know where your traffic is coming from. You may have a really traffic source.
I think the rule of thumb numbers that I've heard for 1 and 7 are 50 and 25. Above those is good.
Yeah. High is good in this stuff.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for attending the Casual Connect 2012 Emerging Trends track.
Thanks, Lloyd. That's very good.
Enjoy your evenings, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.